And I'm Jonathan Sugar Jr.
And we have a lot of news to cover today, but before we get to the latest in publishing, we're going to spend some time talking about Zeitgeist, which is a topic
Yay!
that I love to talk about. Zeitgeist is, I think, a German word that stands for the spirit of the age. It has to do with culture, and it's particularly important for authors because a book that resonates in one era may not resonate in another. And we're in the process of a major cataclysmic zeitgeist shift that has been predicted for decades to happen around this time. And it's happening. And now the kids don't call it a zeitgeist shift, they call it a vibe shift. But I think everyone can feel that things are a little bit different. The stories that resonated didn't used to resonate. Superhero movies aren't as popular. And so, what is? We're going to get into it in this episode. We're going to hit Zeitgeist from several different angles. If you want the hard hitting news, we have some hard hitting news stories. But every once in a while, it's important to take a step back and look at the bigger picture trends. And one of the biggest picture trends is romantasy. So let's start with
Yay!
romantasy. Jonathan, is it true that 2 out of 3 of the best-selling books on Kindle are romance books?
Yep, that seems to be what reports are indicating. So the bottom line has reported that they had an interview with Alex Newton from Kalytics to go into the numbers of how romance is breaking down. And they went through a lot of things. Publishing trends have typically a 5 to 10 year life cycle. They went through Google searches to see what was what was being searched for, like billionaire romance, which rose with 50 Shades of Grey. That's actually starting to trend down. Mafia romance went up. Hockey romance. We're going through several different cycles on how romance is. Now, in the top 100 bestsellers on Kindle, 61% of titles are romance. Okay, and that includes romantasy. The major component of it is romance.
And it also includes women's fiction, which I think is about 6 or 7% of that 66%. So
Right.
it's 6 out of 10 is true romance, because women's fiction is kind of on the edge of
Right.
romance.
But what you're also seeing here, and this is a comment that someone made, is that if you go to the epic fantasy bestseller list, you don't find a classic epic fantasy on it. You're gonna find a romantasy. You're going to find something with romance as one of the major key points of it, as opposed to when before it was good versus evil, man versus monster, um, kingdom versus kingdom kind of stuff. Now you're more locked into it's going to be about a guy and a girl, or it's
Yeah,
going
but
to
in
be
some
about
ways,
romance.
a lot of romantasy, from what I understand, is basically a Conan the Barbarian story, but from the damsel's perspective. It's
Which
like
is
Conan the
so
Barbarian has
interesting.
become the male character in the female focused fiction. But it's very much that man with the dark past who's not good. Right? He's honorable, but he's not good. He's powerful, but he's not kind.
And she's
Obviously,
going to
different
change him.
romantasies have
Yeah.
different kinds of men, but that kind of Conan the Barbarian character seems to be what romantasy readers are drawn to, which is, when you look at it from that perspective, very much a classic sword and sorcery um, element of this story. So you have sword and sorcery, which is a little bit different than epic fantasy. You have grim dark versus noble dark, which actually we're going to get to that those 4 quadrants here in a second, because it connects. In fact, we should probably, you keep going on the romancy. I'm going to connect it
Right, right, right.
with the 4 cycles.
So the question being asked is, where's the diversity in the books, at least in the top end of the market? And Alex seems to think, it's not really. You don't look at the top end of the market, okay? There are people who are making a very good living in the mid range of the market, and they're writing lit RPG, they're writing game lit. It's not necessarily romance focused, so you don't have to shift over to writing romance in order to make some decent money on Kindle right now. There's still a place for you to be there and actually sell some books. One thing I would say about this romance going higher is, I used to work atmospherics when I was in the Marine Corps, seeing what else was going on at the same time so we could more accurately predict what the enemy was going to do. And females have been complaining a lot lately. Uh, and I'm hearing this question a lot. Where are the men? And this has been a trend that's been going on probably for the past 2 years on social media. Is women are complaining that they can't find men anymore, men willing to commit, men willing to um,
Singles events where
take
there's
a
no men
risk.
at the
Right, there's
singles
singles
event.
events where there's no men. And an interesting part of The Accountant 2, which is one of the top movies on Amazon Prime right now, is it starts with him going to a singles event. And there's a lot of, very excited women there to go and find their partner, their match, or whatever. And what we're seeing is a dearth of true romance in real life. And when there is a famine in one area, they go and look for it in fiction. I say they. It's anyone who's experiencing this kind of thing. I mean, if you're working a corporate desk job, you want to read Conan the Barbarian. You don't want to read more about your desk job. So when you're missing something, you go looking for it in your fiction. And right now, it really looks like women in particular are missing romance. I mean, what was the big news that came out this past week? Grok releases an AI companion that it's so. I don't want to say cringe because I hate that word, but you can talk to your AI girlfriend about anything, and it is yeah, it's pretty rough. But the point is that there is a hole. There's been damage done to the regular way men relate to women and women relate to men, and them forming the connections that create families and create the satisfaction people get out of life. So now they're turning to it in fiction.
So look at Jack Reacher is a good example of this. Jack Reacher is a very active character in the story. As a protagonist, he protags. He's not afraid to punch the bad guy. And yet, romantically, he's incredibly passive. And this is a big shift from how stories were 40 years ago, where the men were far more active romantically. And I think it's a shift away from what readers are wanting, because you'll notice the Jack Reacher stories are not particularly popular with women. Like the Amazon Prime show seems to be very much a show buy-in for men. I don't. You may disagree with me. Those of you here on the live chat, and we'll keep throwing your comments up on screen because we do want to hear from you. And but of the people that I've talked to who've seen Jack Reacher, they're all dudes, and women seem to be looking for that more active protagonist.
That's so funny. I have the
protagonist.
exact opposite experience. It's all the women talking about Jack Reacher because they're posting pictures of him shirtless and they're like, I'm watching this for the plot.
So this I may be undermining my argument here with this particular example because I do know that a lot of women really like that actor and they don't care really what he's doing or saying.
They don't care what he's doing.
Yeah, so just put Fabio on the cover. So there was a to connect this romanticy. Somebody shared. I saw Larry Correa retweet this, and I commented on Larry's on X. It connected the four turnings with the kind of four flavors of fantasy. So you have grim dark, noble bright, and grim bright. So if you can kind of imagine. So where we were in the third and fourth turnings was peak grimdark. So you're looking at the first law, Warhammer 40K, Malazan, the Book of the Fallen, which I'm not familiar with, and then the Chronicles of Thomas, Covenant of the Unbeliever. So that's peak grimdark. And then you have peak noble dark, which is Lord of the Rings, the Once and Future King, the King Killer Chronicle, Saga of the Forgotten Warrior, and the Stormlight Archive. So this is on our kind of turning from the fourth turning to the first turning, where it's still a dark story, but there's a nobility to it. So there's no nobility to Warhammer 40K. I mean, there kind
I disagree.
of is.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, there's not. Let's go to the Wizard's first law. There's not a lot of nobility there, and it's very subversive, right? You find out that the hero that you've been following is actually the son of the Dark Lord, and so we're right now we're in the fourth turning, kind of pivoting towards the first turning. The first turning, though, also includes peak noble bright. So we're now moved full spectrum away from grimdark.
Yeah.
Noble bright is Chronicles of Narnia, Chronicles of Pride In, Phantom Tollbooth, A Wrinkle in Time, and The Last Unicorn. And then there's also Grim Bright, which is Xanth, Dragon Riders of Pern, Neverending Story, The Princess Bride, and Watership Down. So what I love about this is that it matches perfectly with our four turning episode where we talked about Zeitgeist, the episode that started all of the Zeitgeist conversation. In fact, if you looked at this post on X, there's a lot of people referencing Alexander Macresis and my episode about this. And we connected kind of fiction in general to the four turnings, but we hadn't made the connection between Grim Dark, Noble Bright, and Grim Bright. And I feel like this is a helpful heuristic. And so if you're writing a Grim Dark story, you have to realize that you're skating to where the puck is and used to be.
Right.
Whereas if you're writing a noble dark story, or even if you're writing a noble dark story, you're skating to where the puck really is. And if you're writing a noble bright story, you're skating to where the puck is going to be. So if you're at the very beginning of your career, you need to be thinking nobility first for your story.
Well, I mean, that assumes this is going to stay on the same trend because these things do reverse sometimes, depending.
Well, it comes all the way around. The wheel.
No,
the wheel of time turns ever onward. Jonathan
it reverses
Sugar.
direction. The clock will reverse direction and turn back because this is not everyone's experience. If you look at the Soviet Union, they stayed grim dark for a really long time, and they couldn't ever get to noble dark and into noble bright. Okay.
If you've ever been to Russia, you realize that there is only grim dark.
Exactly. Yeah. So sometimes it gets stuck. But as to what he is saying here, what the best and what they call charismatic speakers do is they read the room, right? They understand how the people around them are flowing in terms of emotion and response. If you can do that with your audience and keep your finger on the pulse of what they're reacting to, you know where the puck is going to be. All right. What do people want right now? Okay. That's why Noble Dark is doing well. Why? Dark. That's the setting. That's the time that we live in right now. It's dark. But what we want is nobility. We want heroes. We want people that will stand up to the darkness. Okay. And this is where you can see this in the society when people start formulating around champions, because that's what people are really looking for. Donald Trump is a huge champion right now. He has a whole MAGA movement associated around him. Kamala Harris tried to do it, but she couldn't hold it together long enough to get people to form around her. And right now, Democrats are really looking for this champion-type individual. What's his name? The guy in New York City who just he basically won mayor, Mamdani.
Yeah.
Mamdani. Gavin Newsom's trying to do it. People are looking for champions right now. They're not looking for movements or ideologies. They're looking for a person to follow, and that is Noble Dark. It's a dark setting, and there is one champion that you're going to follow. Now, when times get good, when the champion has saved the world and changed everything, that's when you get into Noble Bright. Now you want to talk about good times with good people. All right, and you're going to have your fun stories. You're going to have your hobbits just hanging out in a tavern. This is where a lot of your Dungeons and Dragons does really well, where people just meet in a tavern and go and have goofy stories.
Well, I feel like Dungeons and Dragons as an activity maps to all four quadrants, because whatever
it does,
the
it
zeitgeist
depends
is
where
of
you
the
are,
age, and where people are in their personal lives. Because just because all of society is kind of heading in a direction doesn't mean that it's universal. Some people are more affected by societal trends than others, and other people are completely unaffected. And society comes and goes, and they are like a rock, and they will change their mind, maybe, but probably not. And we love those people, and we call them Presbyterians.
Well, you can see this. Like, just examine the Batman arcs. Okay, what did we have in the 1960s? Okay, we had a really goofy Batman. Like, that guy was a comedian, and it was just slapstick. I'm going to punch you so hard, words will appear in midair.
Which is also what we saw with Princess Bride, right? It's a grim, bright story. There's a silliness, a line of silliness all the way through the story. But it's still kind of upbeat, even with its, torture.
But then Batman continued to rotate, and as the fear of the Cold War continued to go up, he changed into more of a fighter, and more of a grim, dark kind of Batman. And you can see it continuing to turn. Justice League was definitely Noble Dark. It was a dark setting, and Batman was a dark hero, but he was a very good hero. and then you get into the Christopher. Why can't I
Christopher
remember his name?
Nolan.
Nolan. You get into his Batman, and that almost did a couple turns there because it started Noble Dark, but then went into Grim Dark because the idea was that Gotham was deteriorating and the rich were feeding off of the poor, which was Catwoman's whole thing in the third movie. And the eco terrorists were attacking based off of the fact that the rich were. It was the setting that was dark, but the heroes were bad too.
Yeah.
And so that you saw a turn go back there on the clock. So just watch and see what the audience is responding to see where you're going to take your story. What do they need at this particular point in time?
Another way to think of this, to move away from the fantasy language, is towards construction and destruction. So the dark stories are stories of destruction. So a quintessential grim dark story is The Matrix, right? Neo lives in this very bleak world, and he's gaining power to destroy the bleak world. At no point is he
Right.
building something new. And as the story progresses, more and more destruction happens, and his gaining of power, his progressing through the plot is not so that he can build, it's so that he can destroy. And we saw
I
in the
actually
90s.
don't agree. You see, because his character is all about creating hope. Because all the people that were in despair, besides Morpheus, okay, Morpheus is the one who had hope the whole time, but everyone else didn't believe that Neo, including Neo, would be the chosen one, that he would be the one that would change everything. But then, as he continued to go and acquire power, you see more and more people turning to, the one line from the first Matrix is, he's beginning to believe. And that is the change that goes throughout and eventually destroys the Matrix, is because humanity is choosing to believe in not just in the chosen one, but in the representative of humanity and what humanity can do.
Well, but that's exactly my point. He's destroying the Matrix, right? So, yes, there's hope that Katniss Everdeen can overthrow the Central District, but there's no like the Central District can be reformed. The Central District can be rebuilt, right? The evil must be destroyed is very much kind of the zeitgeist. And what we're so that's kind of the dystopian, and we're finding that dystopian settings and dystopian stories aren't doing very well right now, because there's a dystopian fatigue. And let me know in the chat, do you feel dystopian fatigue? Because I could be wrong on this. I definitely feel dystopian fatigue. And it's you can think of it as a spectrum. You have a dystopian on one end, then you have a Western, like an old school Western on the other end. And Westerns are about building society, right? Little House on the Prairie. They're going into a prairie
Yeah,
and they're building
yeah.
a civilization. They are
There's a
constructing
foundation of
something.
hope.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very different kind of story. And even, like the view of the government is very different, right? So the government, and you can define government in different ways. So the government of the Matrix is obviously not the president. It's the computers that run the Matrix. The government is corrupt and is a source of evil. Whereas in a Western, the government is the one thing that's protecting people from evil, right? The
Yeah,
sheriff
the
with the
marshal's gonna ride
badge
through the
is
yeah.
yeah. So it's very much an Arthurian story. So a Western sheriff is Arthur building civilization out of nothing, right? There's no civilization out west. It's the Wild West. And because it's wild, it's dangerous. And because it's dangerous, we need government. We need institutions. We need good men who are strong men, who are violent men, who are willing to use violence to create institutions to hold back evil. It's a very,
Right.
very different kind of story. We see this like a forerunner of this kind of story is actually in the video game Fallout 4. So Fallout 4 is in a post-apocalyptic
Right.
setting, but the story is a Western, and you are, if you're playing as a virtuous character, so Bethesda games, you can play evil or good, and your experience is very different depending on how you do that. But if you're playing as a good, noble character, you're literally building settlements and restoring civilization to the wasteland. And the music for Fallout 4, if you've ever heard the theme song, is it starts off in this minor key, in this very somber key, but as the music rises, the key shifts to a major key, and there's this underlying thread of hope. And I really feel like Fallout 4 came out like 10 years too early because
Yeah.
2014 was still the like dystopian setting. People were wanting cyberpunk. They weren't wanting a hopeful Fallout 4. And it's what's very interesting if you look at young people, so because the older you get, the less the zeitgeist affects you, and young people are the most affected by the zeitgeist, generally speaking. And think about the kinds of games that young men are playing. What's the most popular game amongst young men? Minecraft, which is a game that is almost exclusively about building. It's not, while there are conflict elements and you can have conflict, the conflict is not the quintessential element. When I was a young man, the game that I was really into and my friends were really into was Command and Conquer, which was a very dystopian setting, right? The world is being poisoned by Tiberium and we're fighting over the scraps in this fallen
peace through technology.
and that is a very different kind of game than Minecraft, which is very hopeful. And you'll see what young men are building. They're building cathedrals, literal cathedrals in Minecraft. But it's not just Minecraft. It's also Roblox. Even Fortnite, which is obviously more conflict, still has building and construction and creating something new in a kind of hopeful, positive sense. In terms of like the graphics aesthetic, is a big core part of it. And what's interesting is when Fortnite was originally created, it was created as a zombie game. And it was in a dystopian setting where there's zombies coming in and you've got to build to hold off the zombies. And they found that that zombie setting didn't resonate with young people because it wasn't hopeful enough. They wanted a more adventurous, a more expansive, a more optimistic setting for the game. And when they shifted from zombie mode to battle royale mode, it went from an obscure game that nobody played to one of the most popular games in all of the world. So there's different ways to measure popularity, which is why you can have more than one popular game, and it will switch back and
One
forth.
thing in the chat that Matthew Bowman brought up, there are plenty of Westerns that have no true law and order characters. They're the wandering hero, the Ronin, knight-errant story who see a need and fill a need. This falls in your Pete Grimm Bright. Okay, this is Magnificent Seven. This is, you have people building a town or trying to be successful, and someone comes in and tries to take that over. So you bring in dark heroes, men of violence who are never partake in the hope. You know, they're not building, they're suffering, but they bring their violence and their darkness against evil and burn it out against that evil. That's Grim Bright.
And one of the downsides of using Western as an example is that Western is two different kinds of genre. So it's a narrative genre, which is very much a hopeful building civilization in the wilderness, but it's also an aesthetic genre, which is cowboy hats and dusty settings. And you can take the aesthetic genre and put any kind of narrative genre there, right? You do Westworld, and it's a dystopian, but with cowboy hats and robots, right? So it's a Western aesthetically, but there's nothing about it that's a Western in terms of the narrative element of the genre. And so thank you for that comment, because that helps us to clarify this, because some people haven't really watched, especially younger people, haven't really watched any of the old school like spaghetti Westerns, the hopeful, noble, bright Westerns. Because if you watch a Western today, there's a that's been made in the last 20 years, there's a very good chance that it's a grim, dark Western.
Yeah, you don't,
no virtuous characters at all. Everyone is a scalawag.
So to use some AI, terminology that we've been using, you need to widen your context window. Okay, you need to read over the past 100 years. You need to read what was coming out at certain times in society. Just look for fiction that came out after certain historical turning points. The Lord of the Rings is a World War I, World War II trilogy. It was written in reaction to the wars that Tolkien went through. Star Wars is a reaction to the Cold War. You need to look and see what was happening, and not just what was written then, because artists are weird, and sometimes they're just trying to express themselves, what they're suffering at the time, or what they think is happening. You need to look and see how people reacted to what was created. And if you look at how people react to what has been created and what succeeded and what didn't and what created the societal impulse, you'll know how to read the room and create something that then your audience will get excited about and you will grow your audience. There was a question in the chat. I write cozy mystery with bite. I don't know what that means because cozy's not supposed to have bite. There are the usual murders and clues, but the characters live in the real world with real world problems. Where would you place these in the spectrum? It's cozy mystery. I mean, it's it's got to have a good setting. It's got to be a pleasant place to be.
Cozy mystery as a genre um, is less of a zeitgeisty genre, and there's some zeitgeist elements, but cozy mysteries are about the psychological satisfaction of putting the last puzzle piece
Yeah,
on
exactly.
a table. And if it's got bite, it may not be a cozy mystery. It may be just a regular mystery because an
Right.
actual cozy mystery reader doesn't want the bite. They want a cozy experience that feels like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. And it's that enjoyable relaxation that they want. I feel like mysteries, maybe more than any other genre I can think of, is kind of outside of uh, the zeitgeist because it has such a clear psychological satisfaction that's really separate from what's going on in the world around us, because murder is universal. It's not like, oh, we're entering the fourth turning and murders are gonna go up. It's like,
But there's
no.
cozy murder,
They're
Thomas.
cozy murders. It is funny to me that like cozy mystery is a thing. It's like there's a dead body, within the first 5 pages almost every time. Somebody had a comment. Yeah, Kristen had a comment. I don't know if you threw this one up on screen, where she's talking about Animal Crossing, which is another really good example of this kind of building game, right? So Animal Crossing is not about conflict; it's about building, right? You're building an island. You're building, and it's very noble, bright. It's,
Yeah.
my family is very much into Animal Crossing. To bring it back to Arthur, because in Western culture, Arthur stories are really important for our understanding of the world. The third turning slash fourth turning story of Arthur is the end of Arthur's life. It's him being cucked by Lancelot. It's about Guinevere cheating on him. It's about the kind of the fall and decline of the kingdom, and Arthur is a grizzled old man. The first turning story is Arthur forming a kingdom of justice and law out of the chaos of Saxon invasions. It's a very hopeful,
Right.
noble story. And nobody's telling the Arthur story except somebody kind of is. So I was at a homeschool conference last week, and I came across a listener who's like, that what all the young people are listening to, they all won't shut up about it. And I was like, what is it? And she was like, it's Epic the Musical. And so I started researching it, and oh my gosh, this musical is the first like purely Gen Z production. It was created by Gen Zers. Everything was done on TikTok. It's been like sandbox. I have yet to meet a millennial who knows anything about this musical unless they have a sibling who's in Gen Z. And almost everyone in Gen Z won't shut up about this musical. It has 1 billion streams on Spotify. That's Taylor Swift numbers of streams. It has millions and millions of views on YouTube, and anybody who puts Epic the Musical in their like title is getting like thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of views just with that in their title, because there's so much demand. Young people are going crazy for the story, and I think that if you want to understand where the zeitgeist is going, you need to listen to Epic the Musical, and just us mentioning it will probably get some of the animatics recommended. You can watch the whole musical. People have animated it. But I want to talk about the marketing first, briefly, and then I'll talk about the content of this and how it fits in with the zeitgeist. So, a musical about Odysseus, targeted at young men and young women. You wouldn't think that this would like set the world on fire, because it's really not. Technically, it's an opera, not a musical, because it's created with a lot of the operatic techniques, although it uses like electronica and rap, and so it's Hamilton inspired. But the guy who created it used TikTok to explain musicals. So he would explain what a leitmotif is, and like, so here, this little that's the musical element that represents Penelope. And another thing he did was every character had a different instrument attached to them. So at one point, there's a siren pretending to be Penelope, and it's Penelope's music, but it wasn't Penelope's instrument. So if you understand how it worked, and there's lots of little Easter eggs like that, it makes that song hit very differently. And so he was educating on music as a part of the marketing. And these videos that he's posting to TikTok would be getting millions of views. So this is like hugely popular inside of this bubble of Gen Z TikTok. And he would do auditions on TikTok as well. And so the singers are all like, we were listening to it. My daughter's like, these singers have really pretty voices. They're all no-name singers, but they all auditioned on TikTok, and it, like the cream rose to the surface. If you could duet and your voice was resonant with the audience of TikTok listeners, it would do well. So what's the content of this? Well, it's a retelling of the Odyssey, but it's not a reimagining of the Odyssey. It's actually very true to the original Odyssey. It's not trying to fix the Odyssey, and it's particularly not trying to fix the morality of the Odyssey. In the second song, Odysseus, while they're still in Troy, Odysseus takes the son of Hector and throws him off a wall and kills him, this baby. Odysseus kills a baby because Zeus told him to, and if he didn't kill the baby, the son of Hector, who's the prince of Troy, would rise up to become an avenger and haunt all of the Greeks, right? So like no corporate anything would allow for you to have the protagonist of the story kill a baby in song 2. Like that would never get past any kind of millennial. No millennial would approve that because it would be morally offensive. And that's just the beginning. The theme of the story, or one of the themes of the story, is ruthlessness is mercy on oneself. That's what Poseidon, that's his whole position, is that it's an advocacy of ruthlessness. And it's hard men doing hard things to create good times. And it starts with Odysseus being ruthless, trying mercy. So in the story, he has mercy on Cyclops, and it's the mercy on Cyclops that haunts him for the entire rest of the story. And it's about him learning how to do what needs to be done and to do the difficult things. And so you could say it's not a woke story, but it's also not an anti-woke story. It's just like the whole thing is an exploration of morality. And it's a very masculine story. A very, very masculine story. And it was interesting because as I was researching this, random cast members would go and do live events. And Gen Z is just losing their mind. All the girls are screaming. The whole room full of people screaming. Everybody's singing along. It's like big time rock stars where they're not really performing the song. It's like a sing along because everyone is singing at the top of their lungs. And the audience has a female timbre to it. It's like this story that's a very masculine story. At one point in the story, the sirens are captured. They capture the sirens because they put wax in their ears, and then they kill them so that they don't kill the next crew. And but yet it's very popular with young women, which I think it ties back to the whole romanticy thing of like, there's something about young women that are looking for that ruthlessness in male protagonists. And it's like the protagonist killing a baby is not a turnoff like it would have been to millennials at that same age. I think millennials would never have forgiven Odysseus. And one of the things I like about the story is that it follows a chiastic structure. There's 2 acts. And it doesn't like kind of sort of follow.
Daggone it. Now this will never end.
It's like everything I've been talking about zeitgeist and culture and structural storytelling and heroes who are allowed to be heroes, all in one thing. Music is really good. The other thing is that it's a very Western story. I wish I remember where I heard this. You can understand if you're listening to a Western story or an Eastern story by the relationship between people and dragons. So in Eastern stories, dragons are something that you submit to,
right,
or something that you get along with. So
right.
a dragon
They're
riding
mentors.
story is essentially an Eastern story. If you play Zelda, the dragons are these kind of benevolent, kind of floating around. They don't really interact with the world very much, and you can't kill them. A Western story, Odysseus kills or blinds the Cyclops.
Mhm.
Beowulf kills Grendel, and then he kills Grendel's mom. Right? Dragons are a thing that you conquer. Nature is a thing that is conquered. You don't get along with it. You don't make peace
Yeah,
with it. You
it's
don't
like
talk with it. You kill it.
the
Right?
knight rides out to fight the dragon. Why? What
Right.
was the dragon doing? It's because it's there.
That's what you do with dragons, Jonathan. You kill them.
You kill them.
Whereas the Eastern story is like, why don't we get along with the dragon? Why don't we work with the dragon? This goes all the way back. You can find this in the Apocrypha.
Which would be so fun if you sent a Western knight to Eastern dragons and everyone's like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, you actually see this a little bit in His Majesty's Dragon. They travel around the world and they see the different cultures' relationships with dragons. It's really fascinating. But
actually, Mortal
we've
Kombat
had
does it, and I'm going to get into that.
We've had a lot of Eastern stories popular and recently where dragons are good, right? And dragons are a thing to be ridden, and they give you power, and you can get along with them. And going back to the more ancient view of dragons, where they're evil, they're just straight up evil, and you kill them or they will kill you. So I encourage you to listen to Epic the Musical. I have yet to find a non-Gen Zer who's even heard of it. This is the first cultural event that's been so tightly sandboxed to Gen Z.
Yeah, as soon as I saw the word musical, I checked out because I am not a musical.
You would like this musical, Jonathan.
No, I
would
not.
like this musical.
No, I wouldn't, because everyone keeps saying you'll like this one, and I never do. Okay, my wife loves musicals. Okay, so I'll sit down with her and I'll watch the one about the Jews in Russia, which I don't remember what it was. And then
Fiddler on the Roof. I actually was Tevye Fiddler on the Roof in high school.
I got so angry when Strange New Worlds did their musical episode because I was like, this is now a waste of time. Like, I just do not like musicals. I don't like them. I don't like them. It's a waste of time. There's no reason everyone in the neighborhood should know this song and everyone is dancing together and twirling, and I hate it. Okay? However, looking at the impact and the stuff that you were saying, this is absolutely true. If one thing that Gen Z is looking for, Gen Z really struggles with, is the impotence of power to do the right thing. It's one reason why they disrespect authority figures so much. They see a lack of bite to figures that are supposed to have power. Because, I mean, there's been, 15, 20 years of middle management that has informed everything, like from parenting to supervisors to everything.
HR
Don't
directors.
do anything lest you get sued. HR directors, super fun story. But what you're looking at now is Gen Z wants things to be ruthless again. Get up, do what needs to be done. You can see this in a lot of the political rhetoric. It's like, you know what? Just like the TikToks that were coming out. Kill ICE agents. Just kill them. Ambush them and shoot them.
We're not advocating for this. YouTube censors,
No.
by the way.
I'm just talking.
Don't demonetize us.
Whatever. But the point is you can see what these people are calling for, and you can know what they want from that. Now, you can be offended by it. That's fine, but you do need to have some detachment and be like, okay, why are you saying this? Let's diagnose the problem here. You need a hero that has a ruthless bent to him. Someone who's going to kill the bad guys so they don't come back. You know what? I've noticed people don't have tolerance for Batman not killing his enemies anymore. The arguments I see on X, because this always comes up, someone starts arguing about Batman for some stupid reason. And what I've seen is there's no longer any tolerance for it. If you would just kill the Joker, he wouldn't get out and kill anybody else. Stop talking to me about, oh, okay, but it would turn me into a dark person. No one cares about you anymore. We need you to be hard. We need you to kill. And that's something that Gen Z is really looking for. So I can see absolutely why Epic the Musical is doing great, because they're handling that. You know what?
And
you started
Batman
out
is starting to kill people in the more recent films. I think his whole not killing thing.
But it didn't land, though. It was the wrong time. It was too early. Gen Z was too young.
Too early.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're right about that, because we've been millennials are feeling this particularly, and I realize we're kind of mixing generational conversations and zeitgeist conversations, but this concept of managerial state, HR directors with their boots on our necks, holding us down, and no one can make any decisions without being in a dozen meetings. I was listening to an NPR report on how the Los Angeles County has unanimously passed a resolution to cut back on red tape for making films. And but then they dug a little deeper. It's like they have approved an investigation to like have a meeting about the possibility of cutting red tape. And it's like, this is why everyone is angry.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like there's no one anymore who can make any decisions, right? All of
Right.
the decision making has
Exactly.
been so decentralized that there can be a problem that everybody agrees is a problem, and yet no one has the power to fix.
Right.
And people get more and more frustrated until they start asking for King Arthur to just pull out his sword
Right.
and start cutting things
So
and make the problem go away.
this brings up something, and people are asking about my opinion on this in the chat. The new Superman movie. Okay, look, I have not liked Superman for decades. Okay, my favorite Superman was the animated series Superman, and then Henry Cavill. Um, this new one, I haven't seen it, but I've watched tons of clips on it. I have kids; I can't go to the movie theater. The change that they're doing with this Superman, I don't think addresses what the audience wants. Okay, so like we're talking about, what happened in Man of Steel that was the big controversial moment in Man of Steel? There was two actually that keep rotating around. His father ordering him to stay under the bridge and not save him, which I'm not getting into that, but is such a beautiful moment and it's so complex and I love it. The second one was Superman snapping Zod's neck. And at the time, no one liked that. That wasn't the Superman they wanted. It is today the Superman they want.
Yeah, people's memory of Man of Steel, like people are like referring to it like Man of Steel, like great movie. I'm like, what are you talking about? Everybody hated that, but their recollection of it is shifted by their change. So they're now judging this older film by the current zeitgeist, and it was a film that in some ways was too early for its time.
Yeah. I have to address something in the chat. There's some wrongness happening. No, Marines are not soldiers on the water. Just, before I start yelling, I'm gonna go ahead and.
You're that retired Army guy, right? The former Army
Oh
guy.
my gosh. No, former Army guy. It made it even better. No. Marines are not soldiers on the water. Actually, Marines killing their enemies is coming back. So I'm seeing tons of success with Semper Die, which is Marines going out and killing enemies. That's unexpected success. Like I wasn't anticipating this kind of response to it. The people really want evil to be destroyed right now. There's a very strong sense that evil is winning right now. And a lot of that's politically motivated because both sides of politics have decided to call the other side evil now. And so evil is now always present. It doesn't matter who's winning. So there's this constant presence of evil in somebody's mind, and we're so tired of it, we just want it to stop. I don't want to argue with it. I don't want to negotiate with it. I don't want to persuade it to come back to the light. I just want it to die so that life can get better. And this is kind of where people are at right now. Now, it's not where they're going to stay, so keep that in mind, okay? And writing a book, if you're super fast, if you're Rick Partlow or something, you can write this book in a month and still meet the puck. You should probably be look to see if this problem is going to get solved, or if your audience thinks this problem is solved. So if your audience is a Trump voter, okay, you think the problems are being solved, unless you're up on this Epstein stuff right now. So you can go meet the puck somewhere in Noble Bright, right? But if you're not a Trump person, if you're a Democrat and your audience, you're still in what, Noble Dark?
Noble Dark.
Yeah, you need a champion, or your audience wants a champion to save them from the darkness, right? So you have to understand this is not a universal one-size-fits-all thing. Someone
And
is always losing, and whoever you're writing for, you need to write for them.
and this is one of the challenges writing books across cultures is that different cultures are moving through the turnings. They're at different spots in the
Yeah.
turnings. And there's one view that East and West are in opposite points of the turning. So they're like Eastern culture and Western culture is like rotating. So it's like the
Yeah.
1980s right now over in China. And this is something that has not been sufficiently researched because the turnings is actually something there's a lot of research, like anthropological research on this. This isn't just like some crackpot idea that Thomas had. It's like there's a bunch of books on it. There's a whole school in the academy that follows this. The East West thing is insufficiently studied. And some of the books that I've read are like, this is our hypothesis, but we don't know enough about Chinese culture to like defend it like or to answer the question. But it rings true for me based off of also my limited understanding. But where it gets interesting is that there's a lot of countries that are a mix of East and West, right? Like you've got a country like Turkey, for instance, that's a mix of East and West. And Europe now has a lot of Eastern and Middle Eastern
Yeah.
influences culturally. And so that moves them kind of around the zeitgeist window. And it actually makes those audiences really tricky to write for.
Yeah.
And why, if you talk to European writers, a lot of them are making a lot of their money writing for the American audience.
Yeah.
And a lot of Americans are like, oh, I can use AI to translate my book into, and they look on the list of most popular languages like Chinese. There's a lot of people in
You
China.
have
They're going to
no
love my
idea.
book.
Like,
It's like, no, they're not.
you use different ordnance for different targets, okay?
They-
You have no idea if this is going to work on this.
Your biggest barrier to hitting the Chinese market is not actually the language that your book is written in, because people in China can read English. In fact, based off some counts, there's more English speakers in China than there are in the United States. Because
For
of how many-
instance, do you think Chinese people care at all about Grey's Anatomy? They do not.
So what resonates? There's a zeitgeist issue, but there's also just a cultural issue, right? Because even
Yeah.
if you compare, if you align on the zeitgeist, which would mean shifting in time, there's still huge cultural differences down to the dragons thing, right? Which that's a symbol of kind of a cross fiction, right? How do you handle conflict?
Yeah.
How do you handle a man against nature thing? Is nature something to be accommodated, or is nature something to be defeated? And a lot of people kind of are puzzled why their book doesn't do better abroad. Because like,
Yeah.
I translated it, I've got it published, and it's like, well, there's a bunch of issues here. One is the cultural issue. There's the language issue. There's also the money issue. So one of the things Americans don't realize is how poor Europeans are compared to Americans. I think the most European countries have a gross domestic product per person around 40K, 50K US, 60K for the wealthier European countries. $60,000 per person GDP. That's like the poorest states in the United States. So if you take out the micronations, European micronations kind of cheat because of numerator and denominator
Right.
issues. If you have a bunch of people who are traveling into the place to work, but they don't count as population because they sleep in another place, totally messes up the math for GDP per person. And GDP is kind of a bogus number, so you always have to kind of say that. But there's just not a lot of discretionary spending in Europe. And that's not our impression of Europeans, because the Europeans that Americans interact with are the Europeans who can afford to come to America and spend money in America. And so,
Right.
sure, there's wealthy Europeans, but not enough to support an author necessarily. And so that's it. And Europe as a continent is wealthier than Africa or South America.
The point of this is that there are more factors than just your book not being in the language
That's
going to
right.
affect your book's success. And you need to know your target before you start launching at your target, because you're going to go way off.
You can waste a lot of money and start to believe things about yourself that aren't true. Like,
Right.
I must not be a good author because my
Oh,
books
I'm
aren't
not-
making any money.
Yeah. His
in
book is
court.
doing good. Mine is. Look, man, it's not all the same. Okay?
That's right.
really got to understand how, because books aren't, it's not you launch it and it explodes. It's you launch it and then the target area has to resonate with it. It has to react to it, engage it, and accept it, and disseminate it. And that's how you achieve success as a book marketer.
And another way to help understand this is other English speaking countries. So my book is really popular in the US. Why isn't it popular in the UK? And I'm like, well, let me ask you one question. Did you find the UK's version of The Office to be funny?
Yeah. Great point.
They loved it. They loved it so much they made an American version.
Such a dumb show.
And do you know what? I don't enjoy it. I have tried
Nope.
on multiple occasions to watch the UK's version of The Office, and I just can't get into it.
I like the American Office. UK Office is a struggle, man.
Yeah, so that's where we are with a cultural difference. And I would say the UK and the US are more similar than, say, South Africa and the US, which is another English-speaking country. And I would say we're probably more similar to the UK than we are to New Zealand, but I think we're most similar to Australia. Although Australia and New Zealand are very quickly resetting to like geographic default, so they're both becoming more and more Asian. Their cultures are becoming more Eastern, and more of a dragons are a thing that you live with kind of culture, which is really interesting. So while they are linguistically,
it's really weird because Australia has like flying spiders. That would definitely be on the destroy evil side of things.
Yeah, but that's anyway. There's a lot to break down there, and I know we have an audience around the world. Although a lot of our international listeners watch the replay because watching this live is not super easy. There's one more Zeitgeist. This Zeitgeist conversation kind of took over this whole episode. But there's one more Zeitgeist topic I wanted to bring up, and this is a post that went viral on X, and it was about fantasy readers getting tired of DM written fantasy. So, Jonathan, as a DM,
yeah,
what is a DM, and to walk us through this story?
So a DM is a dungeon master, and it's basically the DM's job to take a story, make up a story, take a different story, mostly we plagiarize, and let our players play through this story. And then you adjust the story based on what the players do. And good DMs do it to maximize their players' enjoyment of the story. But it really depends on what the players want, which is why D&D is great for covering all four of the
stands for Dungeons
terms.
and Dragons.
Right, but it's basically just a catch-all term for any kind of tabletop RPG, because some people like doing sci-fi. There's a Warhammer 40K, there's a Star Wars one, there's a Lord of the Rings one. There's all kinds of things you can do, depends on the setting you want to play in. So I'm just going to use the term D&D. A DM's job is to take low-grade stories and let people play through it. You don't want it to be too high, too literary, or too epic, because then people can't interact with it. You don't want your players to have to be speaking in High Elvish. Okay, you just say, okay, you have the High Elvish skill, so you're speaking in Elvish now. The point this guy is making is that reading books shouldn't be the same as playing through a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, because a book should have a higher production value to it, is kind of what he's saying. The problem right now with the ease of publishing is that a lot of trash is getting published, and there's a lot of very low production value kind of books being put out, and they can burn up time. If you're the kind of person that says, I never not finish a book, I finish every book. I don't do that anymore. I used to say that.
There's also a derivativeness. A lot of some DMs will use their play sessions as inspiration for their writing, which makes everything kind of generic version of D&D, which is already a generic version of Tolkien.
Right.
And
you can't copy a copy a copy.
Like, some people won't put a monster in their book unless there's a D&D page on it. And it's like, at that point, are you really telling a story? Like, are you any better than just using AI to write your story for you if you're letting your playtesters play? Now, I will say, in defense of this, a D&D play session in some ways is a version of the bedtime story, but with dice.
Yes.
So there's a interactivity if you tell bedtime stories, and Jonathan, I know you tell
Hmm.
bedtime stories. Right now, I'm telling my kids the stories of Odysseus because we're listening to Epic the
Of
Musical.
course you are.
My kids are
Do you
loving
sing?
Epic the Musical,
Okay.
but
In the chat, do you want to hear Thomas sing?
I'm not singing them the
Sing the
story
bedtime
of
story, Thomas.
Odysseus. um, So, but they want to. So, there's songs about Odysseus and the Cyclops, and it tells the story, right? The songs are narrative songs, but it's using a lot of big words. My
Right.
children are wanting to understand it better, and some of the storytelling is actually visual. So, watching it, the animatics of it, fill in some of the gaps because
Yeah.
sometimes it's just music and there's a fight scene. And so, if you don't already know the story of the Odyssey, there's a few points that are a bit unclear. So anyway, so I'm telling them the story of the Odyssey, which is not interactive, but I also tell them stories of my own creation, and they will sometimes be like, "Have him do this," or "No, he wouldn't say that." Right? Like
Exactly.
there's an
Yeah.
interactivity to it, and that's part of the fun, and it's also part of what helps keep the story resonant. Is that interplay where
Yes.
the audience is like, "We want." The couple to get together. Like we just kiss her already. Youth
Exactly.
is wasted on the wrong people, right?
But you have to understand that fun is a social setting. Everyone's contributing, everyone's having a good time, okay? And it's great. It's honest, it's addictive, okay? The problem is that fun does not translate to the book you write out of that. Because no one gets to interact with it, no one gets to contribute, no one gets to do the things in that social setting, which means that oh Matt, I'm so sorry. Which means that you're not going to have the same effect, and it's going to be really confusing. You're like, why didn't this land? Well, your story was so micro targeted to that player group that it's not going to land with anyone else. It's a different setting, it's a different mechanism. So that's why DM type fantasy, people are very tired of it because they didn't get to be a part of the creative process. I still have people in my player groups who laugh and love and talk about the kind of crazy crap we got up to in our D&D sessions, and I can't novelize them because none of you will get it. And you're just going to feel left out. It's like people talking about jokes that the five of us would love it, but no one else will.
And if you're going to be a DM writing kind of a DM derivative type story, go the whole way and write a lit RPG. Like there
Yeah,
is a
sure.
genre for you, for people who actually want the dice and the numbers, and he had strength of 10 and he punched him with agility of 12. Like that, there's a very vibrant genre of
Yeah.
people who want that sort of thing. But people who are not reading
Little
that
did you
are,
know about my ring of jumping.
there is people who are reading there. I actually saw another tweet of somebody who's like, if you're writing fantasy, never use a number, never say it was 4 miles, always say it was down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Never, because as soon as you count a number, some autistic reader is going to start counting, and it's going
Where's
to
the
take them
map?
out of the story.
Where's the map?
Yeah, and it's like,
Yeah.
that is an approach to writing, right? And this is why knowing who your audience is really important, right? If you're writing for a more female audience that doesn't want things quantified, that's good. But there is a certain kind of autistic reader who does want things quantified. They want to know that you're strength of 12, and then you leveled up and you became strength of 15. And so with all of this zeitgeist stuff, the zeitgeist should never get in between you and your reader.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you're here to thrill Timothy, your reader. And Zeitgeist is hopefully a tool for helping understand reader, because the fish doesn't know it's wet. We don't really understand the culture that we're in until we get out of it. I went to a 70s style like themed restaurant today with some friends. It was like, this is making me uncomfortable. Like, I don't fit in here. This is not a restaurant for me. There are things here that are offensive to me. And it was a character of the 70s, and it was like, this is like, I had to debrief with my wife after I went to the 70s restaurant, because it's like, it was a different time. And it was a time,
understand what just happened.
it was a time I'm not nostalgic for. I wasn't alive in the 70s. I don't
Right.
even remember the 80s. And so it's like, there's good things, bad things in the 70s. And every generation has its own sins that it faces, and its own challenges and its own triumphs. And understanding the times is key. And I hope that this helps. If you have questions, if you're a patron, I'm going to take a brief break, and then I'm going to jump over to the patrons only Q&A. Next week, Jonathan is either going solo or he's going to have a guest. I'm going to be out of town. So God help you
I'm
all.
going to use Midjourney and AI Thomas into next to me, and he's going to sing.
Gonna make a. Actually, it'd be interesting to have an AI Thomas as a co-host to see what he has to say. Oh, I totally forgot to mention all of the new AI tools. My goal is to mention the new AI tools every episode, and I forgot last week. I built a ton of new AI tools. A couple I think you'll find interesting if you're writing a book. One is called the structure analyzer. So you upload your manuscript and then you pick which structure you were shooting for. So hero's journey, 3x structure, chiastic structure, save the cat. There's a bunch of different ones in there. And then it will evaluate your manuscript and point out if you're following that plot structure well, and if not, ways that you can tweak your manuscript to structurally accommodate that that structure better. I also tweaked the plot synopsizer to tell you which structure your book is already closest to, because some seat of the pants writers are like, I should probably add some structure to my novel. Which one is the least amount of work? So now the plot synopsizer will tell you which one you're closest to, and then you can pick that one for the structure analyzer. I also created a what I'm calling not a developmental editor, which will give you a developmental edit on your book that's like shockingly good. I've been getting some really interesting feedback. I'm probably going to have a whole episode on the developmental editor. The other one I want to point out, though, is the character namer. Jonathan, I don't know if you played with the character namer, but this has been so fun. We've tested it on ancient Greek names, ancient like Saxon names from the 600s, like names from Jerusalem around the turn of the century, turn of the between AD and BC. And then we tested it on like fantasy names and like sci-fi names and futuristic names. And it is so good. It will help you pick a name that's thematically similar and appropriate for the time. So it will do the research off of whatever it has. So if there's Social Security Administration data, so if it's like in the United States, it actually has really solid data. If it's like 1800s, it actually has birth certificate data. It's actually pretty good. But if it's like ancient Anglo-Saxon names, it'll pull all of the Anglo-Saxon texts and give you names, but it also looks at the meanings of the names and your description of the characters, and it will generate 24 names for you and why it thinks it's appropriate. And we had so much. I was playing around with it. It was like Neo Tokyo in 2153. It's a cyberpunk story, and the character is slight and shifty, and it was like doing such a good job. And then I had fun with a sci-fi. It's like this person lives in First Landing, and it's 251 after landing. So like picking this like sci-fi setting. Anyway, it's a really fun tool. Some people, their favorite part of writing is coming up with the names themselves. It's not a tool for you, but for some people, they love everything about writing except for coming up with the names, and this will hold them up for like weeks.
If you have to stop typing to, what am I going to name this guy? Which I do. Yes, absolutely use this kind of thing. Unless you already have this planned out and you wrote out their bios, and I'm not that kind of person. I'm like, oh, this guy showed up because I need a guy. I think that's the extent of my planning.
Right.
This would be a great tool.
And for placeholder names, if you just like, I need a name, and so I can keep going. You answer a couple questions real quick. Click generate names. It'll give you 24. You can generate one of those. I also created one additional compendium tool. So there's now a plants and animals compendium, which for most people aren't interested in, but if you're writing fantasy or sci-fi, it's really useful. And I've had a really busy day or busy week with AI tools. The homepage scanner, about page scanner, book cover scanner, and book page scanner all will score. I figured out the scoring. And it doesn't just give everybody an 80 out of 100. In fact, I scored Jonathan's website, and one of his pages scored like a 16 out of 100.
Yes.
So I'm going to keep picking on Jonathan about his website.
Leave me alone. I'm doing stuff.
Those are some rookie numbers. You got to move those numbers up. So anyway, patrontoolbox.com if you want to play with any of those tools. I know many of you are already patrons. There's a lot of new patrons. And speaking of patrons, I'll be jumping over to the patrons only Q&A right now. Live long, prosper, and write books that are resonant with the cultural zeitgeist.